remember.
Oh, I like that. That worked.
Yeah,
it did. Wow, so thank you all for coming out tonight. Rochester weather, but we're used to it. We've got the gear. And welcome to Book Culture North, Pittsburgh, New York location. We've been here, it'll be 3 years in June. And just to kind of acquaint you with this little empire, this we refer to as the book room, the book side. If you go up and over to the other side, that's we refer to that as the gift side, but there are cookbooks and nature, science books. And then out the back is the third little part, and that's the kids' cottage.
Oh, I saw that today.
Yeah, cute as about children's books from board books up through middle reader, games, toys,
There you go.
people, a bathroom, so
Anything
that a kids' bookstore could want. So we love to have events here, and book culture really means to us cultivating a culture of readers and community conversation. And so this is really a terrific event tonight with Kathleen and Kellie. And I'm a bookseller here. This happens to be the last book that I read. And I also wanted to mention that this Saturday, if you are wondering what to do with good old books, we're hosting a book buyback event. So please check out our website for different events. We also have a book club. But for tonight, this is a special evening for us. It's a local author, native, and Kellie is also from here. And so this is a really a great community, and so we have a terrific turnout. And I'm going to turn it over to Kellie, and I hope you enjoyed the event. And there are, as always, you can count on Book Culture for some good goodies. So take it away, Kellie.
Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out. I have to credit someone for us even being here. My friend Lori, we were hiking one day and got soaking wet at Mendon Ponds Park. And she goes, let's try out this bookstore. And we walked in and I was like in love with it instantly. And then shortly thereafter, you contacted me and said, do you know any bookstores? I'm like, as a matter of fact, I just walked in one. My name is Kellie Scott Reed, for those of you who don't know me. And on behalf of the Raffagnol Press, which is our online literary press, and my show, A Word, I'd like to thank Book Culture for having us. This is really special. And I'd like to welcome you to the spectacular. You said it was a book, you consider your book launch. The book was actually out on 2/13, right, of this year. Study in Hysteria. And a general reminder before we start, we are recording this for a future date to be on our YouTube channel. I am the assistant editor-in-chief of the Raffagnol Press and host of A Word. We're one of the top 5 independent presses according to Chill Subs last year, 2023. Thank you. I'm very excited. And on my YouTube channel is where I interview poets, writers, creatives, and those who make the world a better place, I basically say, all over the world. And Kathleen had contacted me, and we're going to kind of do a live little interview along the lines of A Word. An especially warm welcome and thank you to Kathleen Collins for traveling to Rochester and for asking me to do this. It's a privilege. Kathleen grew up in Rochester and graduated from Brighton High School in 1983. After getting a few graduate degrees and trying out a few careers, she landed on one and it stuck. And she's been a college librarian for the last 17 years. She lives in Manhattan with her husband, Gerard, who is also here. Where is he? There he is. Who is here this evening and has written 3 previous nonfiction books, all related in some way to television. Study in Hysteria is her first novel. Vine Leaves Press is the publisher of Study in Hysteria, and it's back there, available to all of you. The story is set right here in Rochester, which was really appealing to me when I read it. I was instantly brought into the story. So if you're from here and you're reading it, you're going to recognize Lollipop Farm and all these names, and it's wonderful in that regard. Flora, the main character, is a middle-aged, privileged woman who is both compelled by and seemingly left out of the liberation movement. Her secret foray into psychotherapy does nothing to quell the feeling there is a better life for her somewhere else, maybe in a parallel universe. Who knows? Kathleen will now read a selection from her book, and after that, we'll do some questions along the lines of a word, and take it away.
Thank you, Kelly, so much. I just am so grateful to Chris, Susan, Sasha, Hannah for letting us do this here. It is so meaningful to be here. Gerard and I are big book culture fans. We do all our book shopping at 112th Street in Manhattan. So I can't believe there's a book culture here. It's like, did you build this for me? I can't quite believe it. And it's also very meaningful to me because I grew up in Brighton. My parents grew up in Pittsburgh. Many of my mom's friends are here. My family is here. And this book, as Kelly said, is kind of set in this area. And I spent tons of time in my childhood here in Pittsburgh Village. So it's just this beautiful colliding of worlds. And I also, as much as I badmouth the internet, we would not be sitting here right now if I hadn't met Kelly on Twitter/X. So many good things do come from the internet. So I'm going to read from kind of a middle-ish chapter, and I can't remember what backstory you might need, so I'll just say there's Flora, the main character, there's Will, her husband, there's a granddaughter named Bee, and if there's anyone else you don't know, you'll probably figure it out. So I'll just read for a few minutes with my sippy cup nearby. A day is pinned in Flora's memory. When she was 4 or 5 years old, at a party in a neighbor's backyard, the birthday girl's mother gave Flora a helium-filled balloon. The mother snipped the string of the yellow one Flora chose, tied a loop at the end, and slipped it over Flora's wrist. Flora recalled the firm, warm balloon and its pleasing rubbery smell as she pressed it furtively against her face before letting it float. She didn't notice at first, but after a moment, Flora sensed her empty wrist, and by the time she looked up, the balloon was a yellow dot in the sky. She felt like someone had punched her in the stomach and thought she might be sick then and there. She looked around to see if anyone had witnessed the event or her distress, but everyone was clustered around the picnic table, squealing around the impressively decorated cake. Without considering her impudence, Flora ran home, 4 houses away, to where her mother sat in their own backyard. There, she plunged her head into her mother's lap, sobbing out her story in hyperventilating bursts. Delia smoothed her daughter's hair for a few moments, then gently pushed her up and off and whispered to her to return to the party, which Flora did with great reluctance in a cloud of shame. As an adult, Flora rarely wept. She hated that particular word especially, with its literal, biblical, melodramatic quality. Sobbing, to which she had succumbed that day of the lost balloon, was embarrassing. Even settling for the word cry didn't help her feel any more compassion towards those who took to it all too readily. Her sister Ruth, for example, and her friend Grace were overly emotional. They would each tear up while talking about something sad, and it made Flora impatient. Couldn't they control themselves and cry later in private? Flora felt that words alone were enough to convey a feeling. She didn't need a cherry on top to drive home the point. It was excessive. Sometimes she felt they were doing it to get attention and sympathy, and this only fueled her irritation. Or it signaled weakness, something she disdained in herself and others, and that made her angry too. Anger was a familiar feeling for Flora. It seemed to be on a low flame within her in every waking moment. She imagined her blood infected with a malevolent substance, an inexplicable, essential component of who she was. One couldn't have all their blood replaced, could they? So she had to live with it. It never completely went unnoticed by her, though it seemed to go unnoticed by most other people. No one would think of her as an angry person because she kept the angry thoughts to herself. She never raised her voice or cursed or used physical force with people or objects, at least not when anyone was around. The most she ever revealed was impatience while driving, when she'd say, "Rat fink," when another driver cut her off. But she used her usual volume and didn't even furrow her brow. Bea, who was often with her in the car when it slipped out, found this silly and laughed. Bea was one person who never provoked her anger. Strangers might mistake her quiet nature for diffidence. When the words were on the inside, held at bay by a closed mouth and a vigilant superego, Flora could present as an innocuous, even kind, if enigmatic person. If the words in her head were ever to escape through that portal, though, the cat would really be out of the bag. The deed done, her new fate established. She would thereafter be an angry person. Just a matter of a few millimeters, a couple of decibels, and a whole new personality would be ascribed. At times, that proposition tempted her. Would it be an easier way to live? Flora took some pleasure in the fact that even Will could not seem to divine her true angry core, though he was subject to her irritability, as he characterized it, more than anyone. What he deemed objectionable, however, was only a glimpse of what was beneath the surface. "Are we all out of olives?" he might ask, standing in front of the open refrigerator. "I don't know," Flora might respond, in a tone that Will found too quick and sharp and lacking in actual concern or aid in answering the question, as she continued to stir the tomato sauce or wash a dish instead of stopping the activity or even looking in his direction. In truth, she was irritable in such moments, wondering why it was her job to know about the olive supply when he was the one best able to see. She imagined a different, better wife in this situation who might turn off the faucet, dry her hands, and join her husband in front of the shelves, cold air hemorrhaging into the kitchen, and say, "Oh my, I thought we had some, but it looks like we are fresh out. There could be some in the cupboard." And she goes to look, finding none there either, and then promises to pick some up on her trip to the store the next day, then goes back to washing up. She assumed most other wives did act like that, kindly and unperturbed. They did on television. On certain occasions, she had a desire to talk with other wives about small moments like this, to find out if one of them, too, might confess to feeling annoyed by having to drop her activity to help her husband assess the olive situation. But none of her friends or her sisters talked about things like this. It confirmed her suspicion that she was unusually bad-tempered. Given Will's official expertise in the human psyche, it would stand to reason that he would be highly observant and sensitive to what his wife was thinking or feeling, even if she was prone to a passive poker face. But the simmering anger somehow never worked its way into his list of diagnoses, perhaps because there didn't seem to be a sanctioned category for it. Will thought he detected many other things wrong with Flora and told her so, unsolicited. "Your trouble was a frequent preamble. She was neurotic," he said, for her sensitivities set to sound. She was frigid and hedonic. He labeled her as a classic neurasthenic personality, not so much as an explanation for her irritability, fatigue, and headaches, but rather as a broad criticism. He had lately begun telling her that menopause was the cause of this and that, though he was ignorant to the fact that her periods had stopped years ago, and her only symptoms, as far as she could tell, were burning hot legs at night and excessively dry skin and roving patches. Will offered these psychological reports at various times and venues, but always when he was impatient with her or with someone or something else, and never when he was completely sober. He delivered them when they were alone and when they were with other people. She accepted them with expressionless, regardless of the venue. Because he couldn't read her face, he whipped up all manner of things to say about her, speculating based on her actions and the few self-reports she uttered. She must have been a challenge for him, she thought, feeling a warm pocket of satisfaction and a spike of rage. What would he have done with her as a patient? Ask her questions about her feelings about her father? Even though Flora didn't think there would be much to find in her childhood, which had all the elements of a happy one, kind of strict parents who spent quality time with their 3 congenial daughters, asking them questions about their days and conversing with them like intelligent people. Will seems like the kind of psychiatrist who would chip away until raw nerves were exposed. Aha, he would effectively proclaim, there is your trouble. Not until he could find some even tiny speck of evidence that pointed in the direction of Flora being in love with her father, so that she secretly wanted her mother dead, or whatever it was that seemed to be at the root of Freudian belief. Not until she hesitated or wobbled in one response, giving him the pouncing opportunity. Not until then would he feel like they were making any progress, or that he was doing the job he was hired for. But it wasn't just Will, of course. His lot was all like that. I think I'll stop there for now.
So great. Right, ladies? No, I'm kidding. Mom?
Her voice, go ahead.
So for me, when I was reading, it couldn't have come at a better time, this book. And I think a lot of my friends are here, 50s, mid-50s, and coming out of children, leaving the home, new chapters in life, whatever that looks like, career changes and just changes in general. The self-doubt creeps in, and that thought of, am I crazy or is everything wrong, even though everything's right? And I think that that's the part that hit me the most of this particular book, is that it's seemingly right. Things are good, but there's that feeling of, but there's something else. How I'm going to go into the questions, but we were talking a little bit prior. When I read each character, especially like Bee, Abby, and Flora, I saw myself in all 3. Could you give us a little background on your characters?
I mean, you nailed it. I am all 3 characters for sure. I think in most obvious sort of the time frame and everything that takes place in 1974, I am Bee, the grandchild, because she was 8 or 9 years old in the book, and that's how old I was in 1974. But the other women characters are just different stages of life of being female, and you can't. Everyone knows that writers write about themselves. It's no secret. It's all we know. So that I am in all of that. And it was very indulgent.
Oh, we have a hand up.
Is this a protest or is it for me, which I just finished at noon today? For me, it was like a walk. It was like a memory, like a walk back in time. I knew your grandmother, your precious grandmother, so I could do that right off. I saw your mother. I saw your mother and Abby.
Yeah.
And of course the granddaughter. So it was like a walk back in time for me. The whole thing,
Well, the whole thing was also a walk back, and truly it was an indulgence for me because I'm obsessed with the 1970s in every single way, and I wanted to be able to live in it. And I also was very fond of my grandmother. The book is based on my grandmother. For those who are like, why do you keep talking about her grandmother? It's basically based on my maternal grandmother, who is, I imagine her inner life and put it on this protagonist. I don't know, obviously, what her inner life was. I was 8. I was between the ages of 0 and 8 when I knew her, before she died. And B, it was me. I have a little granddaughter spending time with her grandmother. Now, Abby is interesting because Abby is really not my mother. Abby is way more this weird composite of me and, me and me. Abby's murky, but I really, my mother read it and also finished it around the same, and she said all of it spoke to her in the same way you did, but I intentionally did not want to write about her or try to, it's too hard when you know someone well and she's sitting right there. It's easier to do when someone has left us.
Right.
But if you see her in Abby, that's very interesting because it's these common female experiences.
It absolutely is, because Abby reminded me of my daughter because she's very like she's more quiet, she's more introverted and non-communicative, and the relationship with her grandmother is very tight.
Oh, right.
And it was good. I liked that part. I could recognize that. So I was like the Flora,
No.
or the
You're the Abby.
the situation.
Yeah.
In that situation. What about writing this book surprised you?
Every single thing, because I've never written, I've dabbled in fiction before, but never sustained it. And everything that I've heard writers talk about in interviews with writers always sounded very kind of cliche and pretentious to me. Like, characters speak to me, and it's freaking true. I don't think that surprised me. Everything that is true. It's like there are, that term plotters and pantsers. Did we talk?
We
about
talked
this?
about that, yes.
There's people who plot and say Roman numeral 1 sub letter A, this will happen, and then there are people who fly by the seat of their pants, pantsers. Now, in my regular daily life, I am a Roman numeral 1 type person, but when it comes to fiction, it's like I have no idea what's going to happen when I sit down. I know the character, and I'm going to put her in this chair, and okay, she'll be sitting in the psychiatrist's office, and what does she see on the desk? Oh, she sees that. How would she react? Knowing the character, I know the character in my heart and soul, but I don't know what's going to happen. So everything was a surprise.
I was actually going to ask you that. Like, do you have an ending in mind when you start writing, or do you?
Not even a middle.
Wow.
Nothing. No, none at all. And even like in this one, I think months after I quote unquote finished, I wrote an epilogue. I think it's called an epilogue. I don't know if it's a chapter or an epilogue, but like a whole different ending, a whole new kind of substantial ending. So that it's kind of over time things occur to me. And even now, I finished the book, it's published, and I'm still like, maybe I'll add that thing about, I'm like, no, it's too late. You already wrote it. It's like so stays with you. So it's kind of just an ongoing, you just see what happens. And also you can be in a different mood on a different day and something different can come out. I'm sure people who write and do art of any kinds can relate to that.
What do you think makes a great story?
For me, it's character. And it's characters being authentic and maybe surprised about things, and being just put in a situation where, that classic kind of arc, they go through some sort of change, but it could be very subtle change. I think that's what you see in this book is a very, very subtle arc. But I know for some people, there's no story unless there's like some gripping drama. Oh my God, I can't wait to turn the next page. But that's not it for me. It's got to be a character that I get invested in. They can be an anti-hero. They do not have to be someone I love, but I have to be invested and interested in them and just watch them change a little bit.
Well, speaking of anti-heroes, let's talk about Will a little bit. So that was an interesting, we had actually had a conversation. You had expressed some hope that didn't come off as flat.
Yeah, I didn't want him to be flat. He was very fun for me to write and imagine, and but he's kind of a jerk, and I didn't want him to be hated. I want him to feel real, and somebody, we all sometimes love jerks. I mean, you have to,
Yeah.
And so they're just, it's like, what are the little things in there that you could see, like, oh yeah, I kind of see why she doesn't run screaming from him. But also like, wow, what she put up with, like what she must have repressed, you know, especially given the time period.
There were a few scenes I would run screaming into the kitchen to Rob going, oh, I couldn't live like that. So yeah, it's really interesting. And to think that in 74, we're all around, we all lived through that era,
Yeah.
raised in it, grew up in it, and how different it is. I did think that Will was just a product of his time, but he felt a little bit to me like he was trying to be better.
Yeah.
And I think I said that and I was watching a Judy Blume documentary about her
Right.
first husband had given her permission to write as long as it didn't interfere with her household duties. And I'm like, okay. Okay. So she wrote and that, but it was kind of stunning to me and Will kind of gave me that vibe.
Yeah, like because he has these little things about him that where he's very showily progressive, and you know, showing his kind-heartedness and everything. But it's like, if you really like that, do you have to put it on a platter? And you know, so I mean, I don't think I think he was genuinely a good person, but also a jerk. I mean, how else can I say it? Like, nobody's perfect, and also he could get away with that kind of behavior given his kind of important social status and the time period, and his wife's submissiveness and silence.
So the character John was another one that kind of spoke to me. But to see how he wrote about her in the notes, this person coming to him for help and for counseling, the diagnoses that sounded so negative because the language used is language we probably don't even use anymore,
Right.
in reference to that.
Yeah.
And what was for you? What was Dawn's main purpose in this
I mean, again, she was a real surprise to me when she showed up. Like, she, I guess it was you could maybe say a foil. You know, I didn't think of it that literarily, but given her kind of more freedom in juxtaposition to Flora, she's, you know, much younger and freer and free of. She freed herself of the men in her life. She really was kind of independent and those diagnoses though that Flora saw in the notes about her, she also noticed they were words that he had applied to Flora herself. It's almost like, are those the only diagnoses that you know? Like, are they just the 7 words to describe women, and let's put them on everybody's chart? And it's like, yeah, they all have the same trouble, you know, those women, you know. So it's sort of like these 2 women in that world, you know, being pigeonholed, and kind of how they dealt with it differently. And I think Dawn was very inspiring to Flora, and like, you know, this much younger woman, but sort of like, you know, nudging her into being, you know, braver and you know, maybe more expressive.
Now, you've written multiple books. What's the most important criticism you've received as a writer?
I mean, I think it's something that I remember learning in some creative writing workshop at some point a long time ago that I continually tell myself, which is, it's a really simple one, and it will sound familiar to you and anyone who's written this: show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. You know, don't over-explain. And I maybe to a fault, like I've gone too far in the other way sometimes, but I'm kind of allergic to reading over explanation. It's like turns me off, and I'll stop reading a book within the first 5 pages if it's like really like plotting and setting the stage too much. So I'm just maybe I got criticized for that early on, and that's why. But I don't know. I can't really think of anything recently. Maybe I'm just not hearing it. I mean, I do. I showed my early draft to readers, and they all found like sort of different things, and maybe they all were related to like don't really understand her motivation for this because you never really told us blah, blah, blah. So it's like, oh, well, I know that, but I forgot to tell you this thing. So maybe I overcorrected for the showing, not telling.
What was the most difficult character for you to write in the book? What was the most taxing one?
I mean, I guess Will, for the reasons that we describe. And not, to be honest, none of the characters were difficult to conjure up, but the not making sure they weren't too flat. I would say Will. Like I said, I just wanted to make sure that he wasn't completely hateful, and that you could have a little. I don't know if I was successful, but a little bit of empathy for him. And Abby is the murkiest to me. Like I could cast an actor in the other roles, but I can't put a face on Abby. And maybe that's because she's like everyone or whatever. Like she's me, she's you, she's my mom. You know, I don't know I never could picture her. So it was a little bit different, and she is opaque. The character is opaque. So that was, yeah, I guess she would probably be the answer to that question.
Interesting, very interesting. So I asked the same question to all of the people I interview. It's kind of everyone knows I'm going to ask it. Could you describe a time in your life when you realized that language had power?
I guess it would have to be cursing. Have people given you that answer?
Well, I'm going to show you something on the back of
Okay.
That's why I have
Are you show it to everybody else?
Will anybody be offended? My husband put this on my. It's a family joke. So cursing is a
That's
thing.
the thing
for me.
is that's where you first hear it. Is in your. I mean, I heard it in my family, and you hear it from a person in your family, and you know that comes with a strong emotion. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the volume or the spitting or whatever else comes with it. And so there's that's power, right? Someone's mad about something. But then when you say it, you, the little 4-year-old, and you get in trouble, it's like, oh, so what I say has some weight to it. So there's that. That's the first thing I think of about language and power. But in terms of writing, this comes kind of relatively late in my life, but I remember in my 20s, I had already been writing, trying to write creatively, but I remember reading, and it was a book by Mona Simpson.
And we're back.
Yes, thank you. The one that she wrote that starred Natalie Portman in the movie. Yeah. So, and I don't remember the passage I read, but I remember it stopped me, like I had to put the book down, and I was like, it was such a specific, weird description, and I just remember thinking, you can do that? Like one can do that? And I was like, I want to do that. And then around that time, in my 20s, like maybe mid to late 20s, I was reading a lot of fiction. And I remember having a similar experience. And I think I was reading a Margaret Drabble novel. Would you like to name a Margaret?
I don't read any. I haven't read any. My mom used to love her books, but I haven't read her books.
And I remember talking to a colleague who was, maybe a few years older than me, and we were talking about Margaret Drabble, and we were just like, I feel like she can see in my brain. And I was like, yeah, I want to do that too. So that's really powerful.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I want to open up for some questions in the audience. Papa? Ted?
Yeah, I think Will's fantastic. I don't know.
Okay. Then I was
Only on the
successful.
outside. No, but you did say you were part of you in each of your characters. And I wonder if there was a part of you in Will.
Yeah. I think he's sort of a, I don't know, like impatient, and kind of like a smarty pants. I don't know. Maybe my husband can come up with some words to describe how I'm like Bill, but yeah, I mean, because I've said about Will that like he's somebody I would love to be friends with. I would never want to be married to him, but I would really want to be friends with him because it's just like sparring and like kind of a verbal jousting would be super fun with him, and I like that kind of playing. Yeah.
Oh, so thank you. I'm wondering about your choice of title.
Yeah.
If you could explain that process.
Yeah, I can somewhat explain it, but you can all Google fact check me about this. If you look at the inscription, if you have in front of you, there's an inscription from the book that this title comes from, which is Studies on Hysteria by Sigmund Freud and Joseph Breuer, I believe 1895, where it was a group of case studies about, I think, 4 women. Maybe you've heard of Anna O, a famous case study about where it's, the title Studies on Hysteria. So talking about those, 7 descriptors of the word that describe women. It's just sort of, now a very dated thing, like all these women with their wandering uteruses and their problems. And so it is a tongue-in-cheek that like Flora is not hysterical any more so than any of us, right? She's normal human person with really just kind of regular brain and heart. And so it was a play on that, putting her in a time period much later than when they wrote those case studies, but like, tout ça change, as they say.
Yes, you said you didn't know what the ending was going to be, but I wonder if you write more linear, or did you find yourself, bringing up things that might happen later on, and then
Yeah, not very linear. And I think I would imagine a scene, like feel like I feel like being in this kind of setting today, and I would just delve into it and then piece it together. Because plot is really difficult for me. So I had to force myself to try to be linear, so I didn't have to, do this crazy architecture later on. And then I didn't make an outline, but I did have to really sort of say, oh, this happens, then this happens. Right. So I would get more linear later on. But at first it's like, see vignettes, and then like patch them together, and then a little smoothing over, like clay.
yeah.
I have a craft question. So when you're stuck, do you have any tips to like inject your creativity? So some people might just pick up a favorite literary magazine and read a paragraph and go, okay, I'm done. Or, a list of words, or do you have anything
It's
like
also,
that?
for me, it's also putting down my keyboard and reading, but not even like a book, just reading. The best thing would be to read an author that I love, even if it's a book I've read already, and just read for a while. And maybe even, not write again that day or that week or that month, but just read, because it makes me braver. That I need to be brave again, and then reading someone else and to having that like, oh my gosh, you can do that. You get all excited and then you want to do it. It kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had 2 questions, but you can only answer one if you choose. The first one was, how long did it take you to write this book? And the second one was, at what point in your process did the title emerge? Did you start with the title in the beginning, or did it not come together until you finished the book?
Oh my gosh, I don't know the answer to that question. The first question is, I could either say 30 years or 2 years. And 30 years is because in around 1994, I think, my grandfather, upon whom Will is based, I was gonna say loosely, but you know, it's not that loose. Sent me a huge box of photo albums of my family, my grandparents, my mother, like old family photographs. And there were many of my grandmothers. She had died 20 years earlier, so I was like transfixed by these photos and really just zoning in on my grandmother and like so caught up with how she looked and what she always looked very mysterious. Like her face, it was like a Mona Lisa smile kind of thing. Like, what the hell is going on in her brain? And I just became interested in it. And right around that time, I was in this little writing group with some women friends of mine, and I wrote a little memoir essay kind of about her. And I think it was the seed. And then I never touched it again until I got kind of finished with my nonfiction phase. And I'm going to try this fiction writing thing again. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try to write a fiction thing based on that memoir essay. And that's what it became. And I would say, I started that probably in around 2019. And then I just don't remember coming up with the title, but I know that I loved the idea. And I was like, I just love that idea. And one of my early readers she said, whatever you do, do not let the publisher touch that title. Because they love to fuss with your that's not going to sell. They didn't touch it.
Yeah. I noticed when you said you sit down, you're writing to read, and it makes you brave. You chose the word brave versus inspired. So that intrigues me.
Yeah.
Why was bravery needed, or why was that the response? Because it's
yeah, I guess I mean that's a great question. I don't know why. I just think it's definitely also inspired, but there's something it's like you can be inspired by a sunset, or I feel like it could be a little bit more passive, and bravery feels like it leads to action to me. It's obviously those aren't necessarily the definitions, but that's what it feels like to me. I can be inspired and just continue to just be inspired and enjoy the sunset. But bravery is like, okay, let's go. The sunset. Yeah, that's interesting.
Go ahead. So a lot going on in the 70s. What is it about that period that intrigues you?
I mean, in some ways, it's just like my nostalgia, because I was, they were the years I grew up. So they just were cool. They were so cool. And the styles and the music and the TV shows and the movies, everything was seems from this, many years later perspective, just so great. And
It was tinged in darkness.
Yes, there was a darkness.
And I love that.
Me too.
That's great.
Me too.
It was free reign.
I know.
Yeah.
It was it was totally different. Gone in their bicycles for 10 hours. Yeah, we were.
They didn't know where you were.
Yeah.
And all that, I'm thinking.
They didn't care. And I go, and he didn't care. It was wonderful.
Obviously, that's why it works, right?
It was wonderful.
Disagreement, like, see ya. I mean, you're right. I think it is that darkness that I like too. It's like,
A little bit of danger.
and in all the movies and all the stuff that Skelter,
Yeah.
kidnappings and like the double initial kidnapper. Do you remember?
Yes, my mom lived on the street from one of the girls who was taking us.
I was like, he doesn't know my name's spelled with a K. He's gonna come and get me because my name's Kathleen. So that was really
that was a little
all that kind of stuff. Like I love all of the movies, the TV, everything. So there's that. So that it allowed me to time travel. Writing this book, I felt like I was time traveling, really, and especially because I did write a lot of it during lockdown, and it was like this ritual where at night when it was all quiet, I would go, okay, we're going back to 1974 right now. It just felt like magic.
Yes.
What is that writing the book change you?
I don't know. I think I'll use the word brave again. I guess maybe it made me feel like I could do this, I could keep doing this. Because I didn't know if I would enjoy it, if I would be successful, if I could finish something. If it was like, oh, okay, but never again. Like, I really enjoyed it. And I'm surprised because I had many failed attempts at writing fiction for many years before that. So something changed in my aging or my evolution that allows me to follow that project through. And so maybe it will help me feel like I can see other creative things through as well. I feel like it has made me more creative in other areas of my life since then, actually, if I think about it. Yeah.
Wow.
Anyone else?
Did you want to do one? Or are you done?
I think we should.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much to everyone at Book Culture. This
Yes.
is really fantastic and beyond, I think, my wildest imagination.
Me too.
Wonderful. Thank you all for coming. Waiting for you, and you will do some signing.
I'll be happy to.
And when you buy one, you get a little Rough and Young sticker with it.
Oh,
So
that's great.
when you purchase it. So
Very cool.
and have more wine, and anything would go to waste. Oh, thank you. These are great questions.
I